Okay, welcome everyone to this third webinar of the series of supporting your process into the CLIMAAX project. We will wait a while to let the participants join in, and we'll officially start in a minute. Okay, welcome everyone again. My name is Davide Michelin. I'm the communication officer of the CLIMAAX project, and I will be moderating the event of today. We are glad to present to you the third of a series of webinar conceived to support the regions and the communities selected by the first open call of CLIMAAX project in their execution of the climate risk assessment. In this webinar, we provide an overview on the last version of the CLIMAAX Handbook, give tips on how to navigate its content, and show how to use the climate risk assessment workflows. We further introduce the support channels and the computing resources offered by our project. Before starting, a few routine technical note on how the webinar will proceed. We are recording this session, and as the previous one, the recording will be available on project channels, in particular from the archive session of the website, in the next few days. You are more than welcome to leave your question in the Q&A box. All the questions will be collected, and probably we will answer to them at the end of the presentation, because today we have just one speaker, so will be a little bit complicated for him presenting and answering in the meantime. So now it's really time to present the speaker of today. And for this, I will give the floor to Christopher Polster from the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast. Welcome, Christopher, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Davide. Yes, hello everyone. As Davide said, I'm from the I'm from ECMWF, and we are running the work package on the support and the further development of the handbook throughout the rest of the project. And so it's my pleasure today to give you an introduction to our most recent version of the handbook, and I'd like to show you around all of the support functions that we have on offer for you. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm hoping there's going to be some new things in there. I mean, probably many of you have already seen and used the handbook. I know that some of you have already logged into our Jupyter Hub and started using our computing resources. But yeah, there might be some things that you haven't seen yet, or that yeah, still might help you in your work. So today's webinar hopefully sort of gets everyone up to speed, so you can use our handbook as effectively as yeah, we are intending it for you to do. So the program for today's session is that yeah, we'll start with just a general tour of the handbook, and especially also how it connects to our GitHub repositories, which is important because that's where you actually get the workflows from in order to then do your own quantitative climate risk assessment with them. And I will be talking about the support functions, mainly the service desk, our public channels, which are the forum and the GitHub, as well as the Jupyter Hub, which contains the access to the computing resources. And one important point at the end of this is also going to be about updates to the handbook, because the handbook is a document that's continuously evolving, and that's going to keep continuously evolving throughout the CLIMAAX project. And by you having been selected, you are essentially part of the process of that now, because we are taking your input and the results and sort of your experience from that, and we're trying to channel some of that into the handbook in order to improve it for the future, and also for you as you are going along. So there might be some needs to integrate updates also into your workflow, and this can be non-trivial, especially with the Jupyter Notebook. So I'd like to just take a minute to also talk about that. And at the end, yeah, we will have a bit of a Q&A. You can already put questions during the presentation, so you don't forget them. But as Davide said, I will only be able to answer them at the end of the session. Right. So the handbook. So as you probably know, you can find it at handbook.climax.eu. It's a website, and it's essentially a compendium of all the resources that we have gathered and prepared and developed in CLIMAAX. And so on the right here, you can see a current snapshot from the handbook. This is from the part on the framework. So you will find all the steps of the framework plus the preparation bits and explanations. You will find all of these in the handbook. And there's important things that we sort of provide in addition, like the boxes on the guiding questions. You will see that we have videos and some pictures to illustrate the framework. And this is sort of the first big block on our website. The second one concerns the workflows. So these are the quantitative risk workflows that are part of the risk analysis step in the framework. And you will find that all of these are represented in the handbook as well, not in a way that you can modify and execute them, but you will at least see be able to see sort of the step-by-step instructions and the descriptions of the workflows rendered as well in the handbook. Plus, we have some instructions on how to get going with actually modifying and running them. And you will see that these are grouped by hazard. So for some of the hazards like floods or fire, we actually have more than one workflow on offer. So yeah, if you go through the categories there, you will find additional things in the menu as well. And then finally, our third big block is the resources. So these are additional resources that sort of support the rest of the handbook, both the framework and the workflows. This contains information about our support. And I'm hoping that this is a theme you will find throughout the presentation, that essentially the things that I'm telling you today, they are all somewhere in the handbook as well. So everything I'm telling you today about the support, you will find in some way also in the documentation that we are providing here, at least in a, let's say, a bit shorter form, maybe not as interactive or demonstrative as I'm doing it now, but they are there. And I will go into a bit more detail about what exactly these things are. But these are sort of the three big blocks from the handbook: the framework, the workflows, and then supporting resources. And like I mentioned about the framework, so the main content is of course text that describes the framework and the things to consider when doing a climate risk assessment and the various steps. But we also provide some illustrative diagrams, figures. We recently added summary videos to all the major steps of the framework. So we will find these embedded in the handbook now. They're all been uploaded to YouTube, where you can watch them through the handbook, where Michaela Bachmann, who is sort of the leading scientist in developing the framework, is taking you in maybe 2 minutes or so per step through the most important aspects of the framework. So if you just want to get started and want to get a quick overview about what the current step of the framework entails, then we highly recommend watching these videos. We also have on the right the guiding questions, which are helping you address sort of the major themes of the different steps. So these are things that while you're going through the framework, take a look at these guiding questions and really consider your answers to them, and you will all find them in the handbook. And at this point, I should mention that they're all part of the sidebar, so you find them right on the right next to the text. If you're visiting the handbook from a mobile device, these might not be shown. I'm just want to mention that here, so make sure that you're looking at it from, if you want to see these kinds of contents. At the moment, the best way to do it is via a laptop or a desktop computer. Some of the things in the handbook, unfortunately, and we're hoping to improve this in the future, they're not always ideally displayed on a mobile device, just because there's not enough width for all the content. And you will also find some boxes containing tips, notes, references to other projects, for example, that are dealing with similar climate risk assessment issues, in some boxes containing supporting information throughout the framework. Which brings me to the next block, which is the workflows. And you can find, the workflows essentially, they are part of the handbook, but the representation you find in the handbook is a static representation. You cannot interact with them. But if you just want to get a first look at a workflow, the handbook is a great place to go, because everything is exactly shown as we intended to. But if you actually want to work with the workflows, you want to change things, you want to execute something, you want to go into the data and so on, you will need to obtain them somewhere and then run them. And for actually getting the workflows, you can go to our GitHub page, which is where exactly the versions that you see in the handbook are actually available for download. So these are synchronized. And then Jupyter is the place to go for running these workflows, because we distribute all of our workflows in the form of these Jupyter notebooks, which mix text, code, and the outputs all into a single document. And the platform to run this on is Jupyter. And that has a web interface, for example, in the form of the Jupyter Hub, but you can also run it locally. Or if you're using a code editor like VS Code, then this also has built-in support for Jupyter notebooks. You might have to install a plugin, but it should be there. And again, information on how to run with these things you find also in the handbook. And as I said, the handbook, GitHub, they are connected. So the workflows you're seeing in the handbook are exactly the ones from GitHub. And we have tried to make this connection as accessible as possible in the handbook. So look out for links connecting the two. Because at the top of every workflow notebook, you will find sort of these two bullet points, which on the one hand give you links to the handbook. It gives you a link to the GitHub repository and a link to our How to Use Risk Workflows page. you can find these types of boxes on the overview page of every hazard, which also take you to GitHub and our help pages. And the GitHub pages then themselves also contain links back to the handbook. So it's all interlinked. You will find that wherever you are, you will always find a place to go from one to the other, depending on what you currently want to look at. Right. So I will also show you that in a second. But first, let me also talk about data, because what you're getting from the handbook is essentially the workflows, which the notebook. So these are sort of the instructions in the form of the text and the code. But in order to then actually do the climate risk assessment, you also need to pull in some data that you can actually process with these notebooks. And in CLIMAAX, we're relying as much as we can on public data sets for that. So data sets that come from the Climate Data Store, from Copernicus, or from the Joint Research Center's Risk Data Hub. There's a couple of data sets that we actually provide ourselves, mostly related to sort of pre-calculated data sets that have come out of our workflows. So for example, in the precipitation workflow, you can go through the full hazard assessment and download the data from CDS and then process that into the necessary data set that serves as an input to the risk assessment. But we also provide the option of using pre-computed data and directly diving into the risk assessment and essentially skipping the hazard assessment step, because we've already, or our experts have already provided the necessary data for that via our cloud storage. This gives you the advantage of sort of having a relatively quick start into the project. You don't necessarily need to download gigabytes of data that you then have to condense into a couple hundred megabytes that you're actually interested in. Yeah, we're hoping you can make use of that, but we don't provide that for all the workflows at the moment, and so this is just part of where we get our data from. Right. A few things to note if you're on a GitHub page for one of our workflows. So on GitHub, as in the handbook, the workflows are grouped by hazard. So you will find on our GitHub organization that there is one repository for each of the hazards, and then within that repository you might have multiple workflows. Things I would like to point out here is and this will be mentioned again later in the support. So we have the issues and pull requests enabled for our workflow. So if you have an issue with one of the workflows or a question or so, this is also a possible channel with which you can interact with us. If you want to download something, you can find it under this green button, which is the code button, which gives you options for using Git to actually clone the repository, or if you just want to download the content as a zip file, that's also in there. And all of our workflows are subject to releases. So now and again, when there's like a significant enhancement, we will mark a specific version with the release, and you can find these on GitHub. They will eventually be transferred also into a permanent data archive on Zenodo, but for now we have the releases on GitHub. One thing to note, GitHub will also show you previews for our workflow notebooks, but we're using some extensions to the notebooks that will not properly show up on GitHub. So some of the info boxes and so on won't render properly. So we really recommend viewing the workflows in the handbook, because there you're seeing them exactly as they are intended to be seen. Or if you're using, for example, our Jupyter Hub, we have these extensions, of course, enabled in there as well, so that everything shows up properly. Right, which brings me to the topic of how to run this. So again, this information that I'm telling you now, you will find in the handbook. It's the first entry in the menu. The basic steps are: you fetch the workflows from GitHub. They come as Jupyter notebooks written in Python. The way that the data processing works is that we're using many of the standard Python libraries like NumPy and Xarray and SciPy and so on in order to do the data processing, which also benefits you, because if you ever need you have a problem with something of this, or you want to build something on top of it, you can use tools that you might either already know or that you will find extensive documentation for online. So it's not some obscure thing that we are sort of have self-developed. No, we're building on top of very mature and established tools that should give you the opportunity to adapt the workflows to your needs, which will especially become important for you in the second phase when you're integrating local data further into the workflows. But in order to run these notebooks, then you will need a Jupyter server. The Jupyter server will be able to launch notebooks, and it has to have a Python environment that contains all of these different libraries that we're using for the data processing. And we do provide sort of specifications for which libraries that are, and you will find them bundled within the GitHub repository. So again, the instructions on how to set this up are all in the handbook for one of the two ways that we are explicitly supporting there. There's also a video that you can follow along. So really check this out if you want to run things locally. As we're distributing via GitHub, Git, the program, is the easiest way to get notebooks. It's also a good way if you are looking into updating notebooks further down the line. But of course, you can also, as I just mentioned, go to the GitHub website, and in here you will also find the possibility to just download the workflows as a zip file and then use them on your computer like you would with any other file. And some data retrievals, for example, if you're retrieving things, you're making requests to the climate data store on Copernicus, require you to have an account. In the case of the CDS, that's an ECMWF account, which you probably will be needing in order to access the support functions for CLIMAAX and so on anyway, so you don't really have to have an additional account. But I'm just saying some of these things will require an account, but all of these accounts will be free to open and easy to register for. So there's nothing where you have to pay for access or anything. Which brings me to the third part. As I said, we've had the framework, we've had the workflows, now we're in the resources, and this contains supporting information and technical documentation for the handbook. So we have a page with example answers to guiding questions where you can find some, if you're looking into a guiding question and maybe you need some more guidance than just the question, you want to see, okay, how might I answer this question? You can find answers there that have been collected from our pilots in the CLIMAAX project and how they have approached this question. Of course, this is not answers that you can just copy because they're sort of for the local context, but they give you an idea of sort of what might be expected of you here in terms of what how to approach these questions. We have a glossary, and we'll also soon have an FAQ once we actually get frequently asked questions. These things will be expanded throughout. So at the moment, the glossary has maybe about 20 terms or so, but we're expanding these as we see the need for it through our interactions with you in the support. We have an overview of dashboards and explorers, as we're calling them, which are essentially websites where access to certain information on climate hazards or risk or exposure and vulnerability data is easily accessible in essentially just a graphical interface. So usually you're put into like a map view, and then you can configure and show different layers on there. So these tools are things that we have collected from other providers. So for example, there's the Climate Solutions Explorer from IASA, which are also one of the partners in CLIMAAX. And you get some individually configurable maps there that are interactive. These can be helpful to you, especially in the scoping phase of the framework, but they will not be sufficient for you to do the actual quantitative climate risk assessment in the risk analysis step. So they are sort of a first step for you to get an overview of a hazard, but they don't. So in the CLIMAAX methodology, they don't go deep enough as our workflows do. There's some some general links to the software documentation that you will also find in our resources section. So this, again, builds on the fact that all of our workflows are built on existing Python tools, existing Python libraries, and we've compiled the links to the documentation for this software there with some additional information on what exactly we're doing with these libraries. So we're not providing like detailed introductions into Xarray or so, because there are already really excellent tutorials out there if you're looking for more information on a certain library and you need to make some modifications. But if you have some questions, of course, also feel free to ask us in the service desk. But again, most of these things are sort of standard tools that you will be able to find your way around by taking the resources already on the internet, on YouTube, or even asking ChatGPT. We have documentation in our resources section also on the data sets that we in CLIMAAX provide. So these are the data sets containing the pre-computed values from some of the workflows. So while they are documented sort of in the workflows, we also have specific pages for those. If you're looking for a specific file from a data set, or you just want to see what's in there, you can visit these. And then we have information on how to access the support. And this is now the next topic that I want to go into, and something that you will probably interact with at least sometime during your climate risk assessment in CLIMAAX is our support. And so the thing I just want to mention is that, of course, the first contact when you're having a question or you want to know something is always a handbook. There's a search function, of course, in the top left. You can also just search specifically on the site via your favorite search engine. And I think you will find that there is a lot more information in the handbook than it might seem at first to you if you're just clicking around. We really try to cover from the software side to the conceptual side to the implementation and how to run things. We're covering all of these topics already in the handbook. So we believe that for many of your questions, you might already find an answer in the handbook. However, if you can't find that information, then we have a service desk where you can essentially get in contact with first us at ECMWF. And if we can help you, then we help you. But if we cannot help you, we will put you in contact with one of our experts within CLIMAAX. And this is a ticket-based system, so you need to have an ECMWF account for that. Information has been sent around to you already on how to access this, but again, you will also find it in the handbook on the support page. And so we really ask you to use this channel for your questions rather than, for example, emailing people directly, because for us, having this sort of single channel means that we have a good overview of the issues that are coming in. It's easy for us to coordinate work on improving things. If we're seeing that, okay, multiple people are having the same problem in a specific location, then we can do something about that. And that's much easier if everything goes through one channel. At the same time, it's also beneficial for you because we probably know the people in CLIMAAX at the moment better than you do. So we are happy to delegate you to the experts that really can answer your questions in depth, rather you trying to find the right person by email. So really, please use our service desk if you have any questions. These can be questions about the framework. They can be things related to the workflows. They can be technical problems, for example, with the Jupyter Hub, or if you're having trouble with our GitHub repositories or so. And everything you interact, or the way that you interact with us on the service desk, is essentially private. So this is not something that will be published somewhere. We might take some of our experiences from the service desk and channel them into improvements of the handbook, like, for example, our frequently asked questions section, but we will not associate them with you any way. So the communication there is essentially between you and us on service desk and in the support, and then also the experts in CLIMAAX. If you're looking for a bit more of a public exchange, maybe because you're also interested in seeing what are other regions doing at that point, we have the issues and pull request channels open on GitHub that you can use, and on the ECMWF forum, which you can also access via your ECMWF account. So you really only need that one account to access all the support resources. There is a CLIMAAX tag that you can use and for your posts. And then there is a category with essentially just questions on CLIMAAX. And these are public channels, so they also allow you to exchange information or questions or discuss things, for example, with other regions that are participating in the project. So if you're thinking that something might be of interest there, feel free to use these public channels as well, as they increase the visibility of your issue, and you might get help not just from us, but also gain some experience from each other. And then finally, we have the Jupyter Hub, which gives you access to computing resources via the browser. Right. So this is sort of all the things that we offer, and especially the service desk and the Jupyter Hub, I think, are the things that you will probably interact with the most from the direct interaction channel. So I would like to go into a bit of the details there, plus clarify some things about the access procedures that we also sent around information about last week, and which we have adjusted slightly to make it easier for you to actually gain access to these resources. So again, for the service desk, you will find everything I'm telling you now already on the support page in the handbook written down. So this is what I'm showing you here on the left. The most important thing that you will need is this link that you find in there. And this link takes you to this form that you can fill out once you're logged in with your ECMWF account. And this is essentially the request form that you fill out in order to send us a question or contact us about a problem. So the CLIMAAX topic down here should be already pre-selected, but make sure that it is when you send it in, because otherwise it can take a bit longer until that message reaches us through the system, because this is the general issue system of ECMWF. So there's questions from lots of different categories coming in. So make sure that whatever you are sending us is marked as CLIMAAX, because otherwise, as I said, it can take a couple of hours until things have been sorted out and actually reached us. The important thing, if you're contacting us through this, is that you have to be on an allow list first in order for us to be able to help you through that. The thing is that this kind of support takes resources in terms of manpower and so on, of course, which means we can't just offer this to everyone, but this is essentially a perk that you now have as one of the selected regions in CLIMAAX. So what we're asking you to do is, if you've received our email last week about the announcement of the Jupyter Hub and again the instructions on how to log in there, then we already essentially know about you. And if you have colleagues, or if you are subcontracting part of the work on the workflows to a third party, then please inform us who you are working with, who you are subcontracting to, so that we know that if there's a request coming in from that email address and the associated ECMWF account, we know that they are part of CLIMAAX. This is something that's important. Of course, if we get a request that's not from someone, we will still at least ask about their relationship to CLIMAAX, but it's important that, or we highly recommend that you let us know first. And this is, again, this topic of eligibility for the support is all explained in the handbook. So please have a look at that, and yeah, send us the information about who you're working with so we can extend the support resources to them. And this will also apply to the Jupyter Hub, for which you also have to be on that list in order for us to give you access to it, because we can't just give out computing resources to anyone. And this is the Jupyter Hub. So I will show you a demo of how to actually use this in a second, but first let me just go through it here on the slide so I don't forget anything. So you will find it on climax-jupyterhub.ecmwf.int. Again, the link you find as well on the support page in the handbook or the announcement email from last week. If you're there, sign in with your ECMWF account, same account that you're using for this service desk, same account you're using on CDS. And if that all works, if we know that you're a user of the Jupyter Hub, as explained in the eligibility just then, you can, that blue button will change into a button that says Start My Server, and then you can click on that and you can start a server, which will take a few seconds in order to start up, and then you get put into the typical Jupyter Lab interface. And on there, you will find that, first of all the workflows have already been downloaded for you. So this happens once on the first login. We essentially just go and we pull all of the workflows from the GitHub repositories for you. So you can immediately get started. You can use these folders if you like. And what we've also configured already for you is the Python environment on there. So all the libraries you will need to run any of the CLIMAAX workflows, they're already there. Plus a few extra in case you need access to some additional file formats or so. But if you ever find that something is not there, you can either install it yourself with pip, and I do believe we also have instructions for that on our support pages, or tell us via the service desk, because it might be a package that's interesting for everyone, and then we can add it to the general environment in an update. Important thing to note for you is there's a 12-hour limit on these sessions. So if you're starting a server, you essentially have 12 hours to work on it, and then the server will automatically shut down, and you have to restart it in order to keep working. But please make sure that you're not in the middle of working on something while that happens. The time at which the server ends will be shown to you always in the top right. Because if you're being essentially kicked out while you're editing something, it might be that things are not saved. So please have that in mind. But I think with the 12 hours, it's usually a case of, if you're logging in at the beginning of the day, then you will have more than enough time during the working day to go through your work. Generally, everything that you save on the Jupyter Hub in your home directory is persistent. So even if you stop the session and you start it again in like 2 days later or so, you will still have all the files there. So you can upload things there and they will stay there. However, we are not providing backups for the things that you have on there. So you've got 75 gigabytes of space that you can use for data sets and so on. But these are not backed up. So if you maybe finished with the workflow or so, or you're halfway through and you want to sort of make sure that these results that you have already gotten are saved, take a second to download those files to your local computer, or if you're working with Git, create a GitHub repository for your own work and upload the changes there so that they are saved in at least one other location so that you don't lose any of the progress. Some common issues that you might find on the Jupyter Hub or have already found is, I think the most common we've had so far is the 403 forbidden. So this happens, or you will see this when you try to access the Jupyter Hub, and we don't know about you yet. So you're not a registered Jupyter Hub user for us. In that case, please go to the service desk and request the permissions. We've updated our policy on how users are added so that ideally you don't have to make these requests anymore, but so they're not mandatory anymore, but depending on it's a bit of a technical challenge for us because we can only give you access to the Jupyter Hub if you already have an ECMWF account. So if we get to know that you are a CLIMAAX person, but you do not have an ECMWF account yet, you won't get these permissions as we are registering you. So ideally, everyone should have an ECMWF account, then we put the people on the list. If that doesn't happen, we need this extra step. So if you see a 403, request the additional permissions. Again, there's a link on here to the Jupyter Hub documentation in the handbook, and that also tells you again what the steps are here. What also might happen is that your session might start to fail sometimes at startup. So you're clicking that this button of Start My Server, and then instead of this thing staying blue and taking you into the interface, you might see that it turns red at some point and there's an error message. If that happens to you, that first of all, try again, at least twice, because that just sometimes happens. Our images, so with all the libraries and stuff we have is quite big. So sometimes the servers just have a hard time getting to the data fast enough. And that usually is fixed if you just try for a second time. But if this happens to you for the third time in a row or so, let us know through the service desk so we can have a look at what's going on, because it might be an actual problem on the server. And again, all of these information on the access and so on, there's an access requirements tab that you can find on our Jupyter Hub documentation. So please look at that in order to make sure that you're doing the things. Yes, so that brings me to that. And at this point, I'd already like to mention or remind you that we are continuing this meeting series on Friday with further drop-in sessions. So it's the same time slot, Friday from 11 to 12 Central European time. But we're not going to be continuing these on Zoom. We are continuing these on Microsoft Teams, and you should have received the link to join that as well last week with the invite and the announcement of the Jupyter Hub. So these sessions are essentially intended to be sort of a live interactive extension of our support via the service desk. So if you want to ask a question, but you're maybe not sure how to formulate it or so on the service desk, feel free to come into these sessions and ask them to us directly. It's also a chance for you to get to know us a bit better because we can directly speak rather than just interact through text. And to entice you to come there as well, we are going to be having demonstrations of the workflow there. So on next week, on 25th of October, we start with a demonstration of the extreme precipitation workflow. 1st of November is a holiday for many people, so we're not going to have a demo so that no one misses anything, but we're still going to have a Q&A session if you're having questions generally. And on the 8th of November, we already have Martin for our developer of the urban heat waves workflow lined up, and more of these will be announced soon. So at the beginning of the month, we will probably already send out the schedule for the next few slots. So you can know which of the meetings you'd like to join. These are not mandatory for you to join. As the name suggests, drop in. Feel free to drop in if you have a question, yeah, treat them essentially as you do the service desk, just with the possibility for direct interaction. Before I now show you how to log into the Jupyter Hub, an important word on updates to the handbook. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the handbook is still evolving. We're still making changes to it. We're still improving it. We're adding new content. You are part of this process now because with the experience that you are making running the workflows and so on, we get the chance to improve on that. So there's going to be continuously updates to the handbook and to the workflows. If there are significant changes, we will declare these as versions. And if you go to our GitHub page, you will find that we're making releases for the handbooks that cover essentially all the changes, including the ones for the workflows. So this should be the place that you go to in order to find out if something new has happened. So for example, this week, actually, we had an update to the heavy rainfall workflow, the extreme precipitation one, where our developers have much extended the example application of the workflow you will find this now in the handbook and this created in your release. And the easiest way for you to sort of get to know about these changes, if you go to the GitHub repository and you watch for changes, and this will then mean that whenever we do a release, you will get a notification to your email address that you registered with on GitHub. And that will tell you about sort of the major things that have changed. But we will also mention all of these changes in our drop-in sessions in the beginning. So if you attend these, you will also always be up to date. The one important thing I need to mention here, and this is something where you have to take certain responsibility, is if you already started with the workflow and there's an update to the workflow, we will not force that update onto you. This is technically difficult because you might have edited something that has been changed. So how do we then integrate these changes? So we're also not updating your workflows on the Jupyter Hub automatically. If you are interested in some new content to a workflow that has been added, but you've already started with that workflow, it's on you to update your own copy, either by starting again from the new version of the workflow and essentially redoing the steps that you've done so far. Or you can, of course, try to use the Git tools in order to update the content or copy certain cells over, depending on how far-reaching the changes are. If you have questions to that, we are, of course, happy to help you in the service desk, but we're not doing these updates automatically for you. That is for you to judge. Is there something in the update that you would like to have, yes or no? If so, then try to incorporate it. And if you're running into problems, let us know on service desk. But there might also just be a change, for example, to the example, but that doesn't affect your current workflow, then you don't have to update. But still, we highly recommend that you at least try to keep up with our releases by participating in the drop-in sessions or getting these notifications on GitHub. That brings me to the end. Quite a lot there, actually, but I still would like to take another maybe 3 or 4 minutes, if we can, to quickly jump into the Jupyter Hub, because I think that's something that is interesting to you. So I'm here on the handbook website now, and as I said, in the support page on the resources, you find information on the Jupyter Hub, and you also find the link to the Jupyter Hub. And then you will be put onto probably this page. So I'm already logged in with my ECMWF account now. And if you then here click on Start My Server, it will tell you what kind of server it is. So what we provide with you is 4 CPU cores or threads, 8 GB of RAM, and 75 GB of persistent storage, as I mentioned. And then if you start the server, this takes you through the starting sequence. So somewhere probably in our data center in Italy, there is an instance of the Jupyter Hub now being fired up specifically for me. And this will also happen for you, of course, if you click the button. So we need to wait a few seconds for this to finish. So this can take a while. As I said, our images are relatively big, so it can take a few seconds until these are loaded on the server. And then you're being put into this interface, which is the standard Jupyter interface. If you want to know a bit about like keyboard shortcuts and how best to navigate this, there's plenty of information online. Or if you're running into trouble, also feel free to contact us on service desk. And one of the things you will find here is that this workflows folder is already there when you log in first, and in there you will find all the different hazard repositories from CLIMAAX. So if you want to start with the flood workflow, you can directly go into here and start the hazard assessment for the flood workflow. It's immediately there. You will find it's that you can directly get going. You can import the packages, and as I said, the environment you will find on there is configured so that everything immediately works. There's nothing for you to configure, and of course something doesn't work now. Okay, maybe we have a bug in this workflow. That's great. Of course, I picked the one workflow. Sorry about that. I will get right to that after this webinar. Like I said, it's a work in progress, the handbook. Apparently, we're missing a variable here. One of the things I'd like to mention here again is, like I said, we are not forcing updates on you. So for example, if you've already started with a heavy rainfall and you've now seen in our current release on GitHub, let me show that to you as well. So CLIMAAX is here. So if you're going into the handbook repository, okay, I have a few too many tabs open, then you will see there was a release 3 days ago. And if you click on that, you get to the release notes for our latest version. And this contains some improvements and a new version of the example. And let's say that you would like to get this thing in your into your workflow, but you've already logged in before, and this is an older version or so, then you can use the Git integration here. So there's the Git up there, and you can say pull from remote. And this will update. You can see these files have now been updated. This will pull in the latest changes from the newest release into your handbook. Of course, if you've already started editing some of the stuff, this might actually fail. And then you will have to figure out what to do. If you want to start over with something, the easiest way is actually just to delete one of these folders, and it will automatically be recreated for you next time you log in. But that also means that you lose all of the progress that you might have made in that folders. But like I said, this is on you to figure out how you want to manage this. We're not going to micromanage your files for you. That's your responsibility. We try to keep you informed as best as possible about any updates that we're making. And if you're done with the session, you can either leave the thing running until it shuts down, but if you want to be nice and give us our computing resources back, you can also go into the file menu and then hub control panel, and on there you will also find a button to stop the current server, and now this thing isn't running anymore. And whenever you need a new one, you can just start it again, and you will find that, as I said, anything you've saved in the home directory of your Jupyter server is still around. So these files that you added there, or so they stay around. Yeah, and I will stop at this point to take questions, because I see that I've taken quite a lot of time for the presentation. So let's go into some questions.
Thank you, Christopher, for this step-by-step tutorial. I think it was very useful surfing into the platform. Also, since also me, that I'm not the most skilled person in this field, really was able to follow your explanation. So just before moving to the question, I remember you that also the presentation, the slide deck, will be available to you. So some of the link Christopher shown, of course, will be there. And now let's move to the questions that are very short, but very they go really deep into the matter. So the first one is about the access to the ECMWF data. Will be available to only to the team leader, or also to the all members of the team?
So by default, so our current state essentially, if you've received our email last week, then you essentially are considered eligible for support. But if you want to register other people from your team, send us a list with the email addresses of those people via the service desk, and then we will add them to our list, and they can access all of these resources just as you as the leader can. So anyone who already has access is allowed to register new people for access.
Okay. Next, where should we send the information about the outsourced partners so that you can identify the eligibility? Is there an email address for this purpose?
Use our service desk, please. So if you're in the handbook, go to our support page, and then under service desk, there's this link here. And if you click on that, you will get this form where CLIMAAX is already selected for you. Just write new user registration, tell us in the description the email addresses of your partners, and then we can register them and add them to our list. That's all you have to do. So please use the service desk for this.
It's amazing, this real-time answer. Okay, so the drop-in session will be recorded and available for the attendees.
So we're actually not 100% sure about that yet. So we want to keep the drop-in sessions a bit more informal. We think that recording might sort of interfere with that atmosphere if people know that they're being recorded, if they're asking questions and so on. We will probably record the workflow demos at the beginning. And as usual with any interactions with us on the support, if there's something that's come up repeatedly or something where we know that we can make an improvement, we will take that into the handbook and add it, for example, to our FAQ or so. But as with the service desk requests, which are essentially between you and us and not necessarily shared with the wider community directly, the drop-in sessions sort of will probably follow the same principle in that they are not all recorded. But if there's a question being asked multiple times in multiple weeks, that's also perfectly okay. As I said, we don't expect everyone to attend all of these. I mean, you will probably attend maybe the ones while you're working on the workflows, and then maybe you're doing something else for 2 weeks and you don't show up. That's fine. But yeah, if we're recording something, it will probably be the workflow demos, but not necessarily the Q&A section.
So participate in a large number. Okay, next. There is a very technical question. I will read the following and then maybe we can go back to this one. So,
yeah, I'm seeing it. So it's about a login error message for the TripWriter Hub. I am not actually sure. I can have a look into that after this webinar is over. If you like, send us this via the service desk if you can log into your account there. Otherwise, send me an email if you can't log into your account. Or you can have a colleague of yours make a request in your name. That's also possible. So actually, I have the form open here right now. So you can make a request on behalf of someone else. So if you ever have login problems, but your colleague doesn't, you can also send us a request still. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to resolve this issue right now. If you have not already tried logging out and logging back in again, but if you can't log in at all, then please contact us so we can look at it.
Okay. Last 2 questions. In Turkey, State Meteorology Directorate provides regional projection in RSP 4.5, 8.5 in 20 for 20 kilometer resolution. Is this data set sufficient for deliverable 2? Christopher?
Yeah, so it's about data set resolutions. I can't give you the definitive answer to that right now. It depends also a bit, to be honest, on your objectives with the climate risk assessment. If you find that the needs that you have in order to localize our workflow to what you're doing, or if you just don't have the data because they're not part of the Cortex data set, and you get the information out of it that you need for your risk assessment, then this is sufficient, yes. But if it's lacking, we might have to look for a more higher resolution data set. But I can't make not necessarily knowing this data set, I can't make a general statement if 20 by 20 is going to be good enough for you. It really depends on what exactly your goals are in the assessment when you're using this data set in the workflows.
Okay. Last but not least, if a colleague of mine will do some modification in his Jupyter Hub account on specific workflow, can I see them via mine account, or we will be able to share modification via GitHub or other channels?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So the short answer is you will not see them. So what you do in your on your space that we provide you in the Jupyter Hub, so everything that's in your home directory, that you are the only person who can access this data. So this is not like a shared network drive where you can give permissions to each other or anything. These are really isolated sessions. So if you want to work together on something, what we recommend is that you do use a service like GitHub, or if you prefer Bitbucket or GitLab or something, feel free to choose your own provider, and then make a repository there and exchange files through that system, because you do have access to anything on the internet via these Jupyter sessions. So you can clone a GitHub repository from whatever Git server you like, and then exchange data through there. But it's not possible for you to, for example, send someone a file from Jupyter Hub to Jupyter Hub. The sessions are not configured that way. And we currently also do not have plans to configure them that way. So they are isolated sessions. So please use some remote service like GitHub or so to synchronize the files. Plus, it immediately gives you the benefit of having a backup of all of these files in another location, which will also be a good thing when you're working on the Jupyter Hub, because as I said, there's no backups for the storage that we have directly for you.
Okay, so our time for today is up. We hope last second question. Yes. Okay, we take some minute more. You asked us earlier to create a Discord account as well. What will we use this channel for?
Yeah, so there's essentially two channels for support within CLIMAAX that have different purposes. So everything that goes through your ECMWF account is more on the handbook and technical side. So that's about the workflows, about the framework, about the Jupyter Hub. The Discord channel is for questions that are, for example, about the financial thing. So it's everything is related to sort of the contract side of the project, so the more administrative stuff. And that's on the Discord channel. There's a different team that handles those requests. If you're going through anything that I've shown you today, that's more for the technical and the handbook side. Yeah, essentially Discord administrative stuff, ECMWF account, handbook stuff is the short version.
Okay, we have concluded for today. So before I give you the appointment for the next drop-in session on 25 of October, right, Christopher?
Yes.
Let me say thank you to our speaker, Christopher Polster from ECMWF, the colleague Nicoletta Boy, who directed the webinar, and of course, our audience today. So thank you again. Have a nice weekend, and see you in 7 days. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.